Thank you for tuning in to the Critical Conversations podcast, brought to you by Mind the Frontline. Established in 2023 as a 501c3, Mind the Frontline is your ally in the journey to support those who selflessly safeguard our communities. Their core mission revolves around pioneering innovation and research, education, and overall well-being specifically tailored to healthcare, military, and public service frontline first responders. The Critical Conversation podcast is a dedicated space for police, fire, EMS, allied health workers, dispatchers, air medical, and military personnel, along with their families. Here we dive into the heart of the matter, tackling essential topics such as mental health strategies, recovery methods, treatment options, the latest research, and professional development opportunities. Before we dive into today's episode on Critical Conversations, we do want to, however, acknowledge the nature of our discussions. Some of the content discussed may be triggering or intense as we explore the challenges and the triumphs within the first responder community. We recognize that these discussions may evoke strong emotions or memories. If you or someone you know is struggling and needs immediate support, we urge you to reach out to your agency's mental health resources or your local peer support group. In time of mental health crisis, you can always contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by phone or via text at 988. Please remember you are never alone and help is always available. At Mind the Frontline, we are more than just a podcast. We are a community committed to fostering resilience within the entire first responder family. So whether you're on the front lines or supporting those who are, we invite you to subscribe, engage, and be a part of this vital mission. To learn more, please visit us at www.mindthefrontline.org. Now let's dive into today's critical conversation. First responders, listeners, and Mind the Frontline members, welcome back to the Critical Conversations podcast, brought to you by Mind the Frontlines. Today, I am honored to have a guest speaker who brings his own personal frontline experiences supporting our ongoing mission of fostering resilience within the first responder community. Our guest today is a retired police sergeant, Michael Sugrue. He is also the author of Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma. Michael is a former U.S. Air Force security officer and a Walnut Creek Police Department captain. He is a distinguished advocate for first responder mental health. Throughout his decorated career, he served in diverse roles globally, including flight leader of Chief of Security Forces, a recipient of the Walnut Creek PD Distinguished Service Medal. Sugrue's heroic actions during a fatal officer-involved shooting in 2012 earned him that recognition. Now, he gives his time back by being a peer volunteer at the West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat and an ambassador for Save a Warrior. Sugrue is committed to raising awareness and providing support for post-traumatic stress injury. The first responder suicide prevention has co-authored book Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma with Dr. Shauna Springer, is an international bestseller offering insights and path to healing within the law enforcement community, and I would say all first responders community, as I have just recently read it, and it's an honor to have you on, Michael. Without further ado, please go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and kind of, about Relentless Courage, what made you kind of bring this book to everybody. It's such an amazing resource and very, very powerful read.
Absolutely. First, I'll clarify. You gave me a promotion, but I was a captain in the Air Force and a sergeant in the police force. So just want to clarify that real quickly. But I am from the San Francisco Bay Area in California originally, born and raised. I knew at a very young age that I wanted to pursue a career in law enforcement, literally all the way back to 8 years old. And that's due in part to my stepfather. He's the one that primarily raised me with my mother. He was in law enforcement. He was my hero. He was my everything. And I actually became a police volunteer at 8 years old, eventually a police explorer in high school. I went off to Sacramento State University here in California, studied criminal justice. I was on an Air Force ROTC scholarship. So I went into the Air Force. It was supposed to be 4 years, but I ended up doing 6.5 years. Served all over the world, Europe, the Middle East, South America, all over the U.S. I loved it. Absolutely loved my time in the military. I got out in 2004 as a captain. I went straight into civilian law enforcement back here in California in the San Francisco Bay Area for the Walnut Creek Police Department. While I was there, I did a bunch of different things. I was a patrol officer, a field training officer, driver instructor, a detective. I was undercover on a state drug task force for the state of California, and eventually a patrol sergeant and a PIO running teams on the street. Now, my story today really starts back at the end of 2012. I was a brand new police sergeant. I was involved in a very tragic, critical, on-duty incident. And that incident was my breaking point. It was my tipping point. After that happened, my life kind of spiraled downward. A lot of things started happening. I endured a 4-year federal lawsuit, ended up losing my marriage, lost my father, health issues. My career started to go downwards. And literally it got to the point where I did not want to be here anymore. I wanted to die in the line of duty. I suffered in silence for 4 years. And it was another very tragic incident that happened back in 2016. And that incident actually saved my life, because a month after that is when I finally got the strength and courage to ask for help. And that was the end of December 2016. And that's where I started my journey of recovery from what I call post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder. And there's a reason for that. We can get into that later on the show. But in my recovery, I did a bunch of different things that worked, things that didn't work. And it was a long, difficult journey with ups and downs. It got to the point where, and primarily due to what I call institutional betrayal, admin betrayal, which I'm sure we'll get into, and I talk about that in the book. But that's where I realized that my blue family, my administration, was turning their back on me when I needed them most. And so I made a decision to medically retire in 2018 for post-traumatic stress injury. And I could have been done just there. I could have gone on quietly with my life and, raised my daughter. But as always, I felt a higher calling. I felt a purpose. And in 2019, actually, somebody I didn't know asked me to be a guest on their podcast show. I never wanted to do this. I never planned on it. And I said no. Hey, I appreciate it, but it's not my thing. And thank goodness this guy kept bugging me. He was a former police officer, a big fitness guy like I am. And he got me to the point where I agreed to do it. And honestly, that single podcast literally changed my life. It led me on this path of just interviews, on speaking across the nation, and this book. This international best-selling book. And I want to tell you the story behind that. I'll try to make it quick, but it's kind of a cool story. So fast forward to right before COVID. I didn't know Dr. Shauna Springer. She's my co-author. She's a world-renowned expert on trauma. She's a clinical psychologist. She had already written 3 books, and she reached out to me on LinkedIn just kind of blindly and said, hey, I want to see what you're doing. I want to tell you about what I'm doing. We're both working towards mental health and suicide prevention. And so we just set up a phone call. And during that phone call, I told her my story, my life story, which is in the book, going all the way back to childhood into present day. And at the end of our conversation, she asked me plainly, she said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I kind of laughed a little bit. And I said, well, I briefly thought about it, and I've been asked this before. I said, but with post-traumatic stress injury, I don't think I have that drive, that motivation, that concentration, that focus like I used to have to get a project like that done. And so we just left our conversation at that. A couple weeks later, she calls me back up and she's like, look, Michael, she's like, I've heard hundreds and hundreds of trauma stories in my work as a clinical psychologist, but your story is going to help save countless lives. And she said, I want to make this book a reality. I want to do this book with you. And without ever meeting in person, I agreed to do this project. And then COVID happened, and we literally did everything at first over Zoom for like over a year and a half, where every week we met for a couple hours and we worked on this project. And we came up with Relentless Courage, winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma. And I'll tell you why this book is so unique, because usually you either have to read like a gut-wrenching, gripping, real-life story of a first responder or military member, and that's it. Or you can pick up like a psychology textbook and learn about trauma and anxiety and depression and suicide. But this book literally has everything in one. Because of this unique format, every chapter is broken up into 2 parts. The first part is my story, told in my voice. But the second half of every chapter, Doc Springer comes in and she breaks everything down. She explains it in very easy to understand terms so that anybody, and when I say anybody, I don't mean just first responders, military members, our family members, loved ones. I mean just anybody on the street. They can pick this book up and they will see for the first time the human behind the badge and the uniform. The real people that we are that are serving, risking it all every single day.
And I loved that format, Michael. I mean, hearing both your side and then Dr. Springer really breaking it down, as you mentioned, as a layperson. Anybody, even the general public, can pick this up and start understanding trauma to those first responders.
Absolutely. And, the awesome thing is, this book's been so successful. I never envisioned that, but I know with each person that reads this or listens to it, relationships are being saved, careers are being saved, but more importantly, lives are being saved. And I receive messages almost daily from across the world, from Australia, from Canada, from, London, even Spain, and all across the US on how this book really has helped change their life. And I know that if people pick it up, they're not going to be able to put it down.
Oh, you're definitely right about that, because before I even reached out to you to do this episode, I had picked it up because I had seen it so much. You're very active on social media. We're both kind of in the same space. But I told you I could not put that book down. And before I knew it, I was already in chapter 6. And it's so not only riveting, but just like the way the story is delivered, going through your timeline, way back, your history. And I think it really did a good job of really highlighting all of the professional training you went through within the military and how that not only transitioned through, but it gave me a really good context of, you did a lot in the military with the United States Air Force and the Special Service, but you also went through a lot more as a police officer. And to hear your struggles and what you went through, the divorce, the health, I'm almost kind of fanboying out having you on the show, but it was so powerful to me because I had been in similar shoes, as someone, as a firefighter, as a flight paramedic who has gone with the administration and had others turn their back. So I have some feeling and of community with your book, and I loved how you kind of explained a lot of things. And then you would have Doc Springer come in and kind of clean it up a little bit, for people who may not understand, or she put it into a little bit better context. But it really made for easy listening, and it's so compelling and so powerful. You just won't put it down. So I encourage you guys to go pick it up on Amazon or Audible or wherever you can find his book. But it is absolutely a game changer. And you're right, you never see those ripples that have the effects once you throw that stone in that pond, meaning your book. I'm sure you get hundreds of messages a day, but it's the messages that you don't receive of all the other individuals that it does touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I'm not special, I'm not unique, and nothing that I've been through is. And that's why so many people can relate to this book, just like you said. Our exact experiences might be a little bit different, but the outcomes, the ramifications, the effects, the feelings, the results on our relationships, on our family, it's all the same. The only difference is that I'm willing to talk about all of it openly. I literally bared my entire heart and soul in this book, and it's the good, it's the bad, and it's the ugly. There was lots of mistakes that I made, and I want people to learn from those mistakes. And more importantly, this book shows a roadmap to healing. This book is proof that with work, with time, with patience, you can overcome post-traumatic stress injury. There is a whole new life waiting for you on the other side. And I'm not here to say it's going to be easy, because the longer you wait to get help like I did, the longer it's going to take. But I can tell you that journey's worth it, because the life I'm living today is better than I could have ever envisioned. I'm actually here. When I say here, I'm present for my daughter. I'm a better father. I'm a better partner. I'm a better brother. And that's the reality of this. And we need to know that, these feelings and thoughts that we have, they're normal. We don't talk about it, though. Our culture prevents us from doing that. And in reality, it's all absolutely normal. And if we can get to a point where we can normalize these conversations, I think you can get through a full career and come out healthy on their side. But as I call it, we need to smash the stigma and make it okay just to say, hey, you know what? This call today that I went to, it really bugged me, and here's why. I mean, it could be as simple as that, but the key is having that trusted environment with people that are going to be vulnerable with you, that are going to be open up and honest, especially our leaders. That's what we need. Is we need our leaders at all levels, whether we're talking about firefighters, dispatchers, paramedics, police officers, military. We need them to lead by example and be real, be honest, be vulnerable. Don't try to portray this perfect image that everything you've done, your career, your personal life, has been perfect and nothing's wrong. No. Talk about it and talk about how you overcame it. That's the key to this whole thing.
Being vulnerable. You were extremely vulnerable in your book. This is my first time meeting you virtually, but I feel like I know so much about you, your history, what you've gone through, just in how well that book was authored and written. Mike, I liked how you put the fact that we need the leaders up top, because it starts with modern leaders, but it also starts with the leaders that are already in place, being vulnerable, being transparent, and talking about some of the other F words that we don't talk about. Because, if you're in public safety, I mean, we hear F-bombs flying left and right, but nobody wants to talk about the F word that I'm most concerned about now, which is feelings. It's okay to talk about feelings. It's okay to say, hey, I'm not right today. That call really shook me up. And here's the thing, it could be just a routine call. I think people have this misconnotation or misconception that, you have to go on this big gnarly call and that's what messed me up. No, I've been doing this for 23 years. You're right, Mike. If I don't work on it, the longer I work on it, the more difficult it is and the more time it's going to take to work through it, but I can heal myself. But if I don't start working on it and I keep telling myself it's okay, and we don't smash that stigma about talking about our feelings, about some of these calls, it wasn't, a really gnarly call that broke my back. It was a combination or a compounding interest, I would call it, over 23 years that eventually I had one small little call, totally innocuous, but that is what I really attached to and, opened up the floodgates. And so I think a lot of people get that misconception of, you have to have a gnarly call, and that's, it could be just leading up to that and not offloading your backpack over, your whole career in public safety. But I agree with you. I feel like if we have these normalizing conversations, we talk about our feelings, and we continue to put out really good resources, encourage people to be transparent, humble, vulnerable, and provide that safe space. I think that's the most important part. People want to talk about their feelings. We're humans. We don't trust other humans. And sometimes we have very good reason to, right?
Absolutely. And, the point I want to make here is that, there's different levels of trauma. And like you said, you never know what's going to be the incident, the call, the experience that's going to break you or be your tipping point. And even up to my fatal incident that I was involved in, I've been exposed to hundreds and hundreds of traumatic incidents, from suicides, serious car accidents, child deaths, sexual assaults. I mean, you name it, right? But the thing is that, and people aren't going to want to hear this, but many, not all, many first responders actually have childhood trauma. And there's a scale for this. I mean, it could be like minor or it can be very extreme. In my case, my biological father was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic. He wasn't there for me. He was distant, but I had a strong mother. I had a strong stepfather. I had a good upbringing. But there were some things that relationship with my father caused that I never realized, like abandonment. So like when my blue family, my work family, decades later, when I'm this successful police sergeant, former military officer, when they turn their back on me, it brings up all that unresolved childhood that we never talked about or dealt with, right? Because now we're these big badasses who are out there protecting and serving, and we don't want to talk about childhood. We don't want to go back there. We push that all away, like I did. I literally forgot about it and just went on with my life. And like you said, you never know when that's going to come back up. And the ironic thing is that this childhood trauma actually makes us very good at what we do. It makes us very resilient. We overcome adversity. We're decisive. We're caretakers, and it actually lends us towards these careers, whether it be in the military or as first responders. And again, we do very well because of our personalities and how we've adapted over the years. And so now you've got this layer of childhood trauma. Now pile on top of that what we call street trauma, which is all these horrific calls that we go to. And then on top of that, you have moral injury, and you also have admin or administrative betrayal or institutional betrayal, like I like to call it, which is where, what you thought was your family, your new, beautiful, awesome family, has your back to the fullest. Well, they do until they don't. And so now you've got literally 3 or 4 layers of trauma stacked on top of each other. And you have to deal with these all independently. They're all related, intertwined, but you have to deal with all these levels. And if we don't do that, what's the result? It's suicide. And we haven't talked about this yet, but suicide is the #1 killer for all military, active military, military veterans, and for all first responders, firefighters, dispatchers, paramedics, police officers, correctional officers. We are much more likely to die by our own hands than the hands of another. That is a fact. Yet we spend no time addressing that or training on it or educating ourselves on it, on how to prevent that. That's the real issue right there.
I love some of the points that you made there, Michael. You talk about past generational trauma, childhood trauma. Recently, I had the opportunity to take out a first responder on a Mind the Frontline first responder experience where we take them outdoors and kind of help them with the recovery and healing. And in that discussion, we actually had a really good discussion about, the childhood trauma and what we dealt with or did not deal with. We bring that into the industry or our profession, and it continues to compound itself because we've never resolved this, right? So this is still trauma, just packed away. And then we have that street trauma that you talked about. Well, great. Now I'm going to pack that on top. Moral injury, feeling of abandonment, identity. I know, at least for me, because, I did not have a great upbringing. I did have some severe trauma in my childhood. I now can look back in my career and see how that played a very, instrumental role in where I'm at now and some of the, exposures and just some of the, PTSI that I suffered. I did not deal with that. And as I bring it in, I really latched on to my Red family. I love just the cohesiveness. It felt like a family to me, a family I'd never really had. Mine was very kind of dysfunctional, and being able to have this camaraderie, we hung out off duty, on duty all the time. It gave me that sense of security. And then at least I know for me, like as I transitioned from fire into air medical, I kind of lost that camaraderie because now you're just dealing with a pilot and a flight nurse and yourself. And sometimes you don't see them for hours or maybe the entire shift because they just go in the room and hang out. I lost that, and it kind of made me lose the way. But that was just the feeling of abandonment that I had from childhood that I just didn't resolve.
Absolutely. And again, these are things we don't talk about, right? I mean, the ironic thing is you and I are talking about this right now, and we're able to freely get this off our chest, get it off our shoulders because we've done the work. We've addressed these things. And sometimes it's that the hardest step is taking that first step and just getting it off your chest, getting it off your shoulders. And the thing is, we think that we're all alone. We think that nobody will understand what we're going through, that something's wrong with us, that these feelings are abnormal or wrong. And that's farthest from the truth. The reality is that there's countless brothers and sisters out there who do understand what we're going through. And there's endless resources that I had no idea about, both when I was in the military and when I was a police officer. I didn't know about any of these resources. And we actually list tons of resources in the back of our book, text lines, hotlines, week-long retreats. Some are faith-based, all kinds of programs, trusted clinicians, culturally competent clinicians, first responder support meetings, just all these wonderful things that we can do. And the thing is, there's not one magic thing that works for everybody. Usually it's a combination of different things, and everyone's journey, everyone's experience is a little bit different, but you have to keep an open mind And you have to be willing to try different things and know that not everything is going to work, but there are things that will absolutely work as long as you keep going with your journey and keep trying.
I think it's important that you brought that up, and it's one of the reasons why I founded Mind the Frontline. Was there are so many great resources. I did not realize how many resources are out there: nonprofits, bike rides, retreats, support centers. There are all sorts of stuff. It's extremely hard to Google or find some of these resources sometimes, and that's why we're trying to bring this all together. But having resources out there is extremely important. But you also brought up, the fear of failure. I think a lot of people are resistant or fearful even to start that first step because they don't want to fail. And they need to understand that failure is part of growth. Feelings are part of growth. If we don't talk about this and we don't say, hey, how did you learn off of your first, response on a bad subject? You learn from that, from failing, and it's okay to fail. I think we have this ego built into our industry and our professions that we will do no wrong. We are perfect every time we show up. I will save that patient regardless. And it's just not realistic. It really, I think, changing that dynamic and being able to talk freely and say, guys, gals, there's resources out there. You just need to find get the courage to make that first step. And that's why I love your book, Relentless Courage. You've got to be relentless about going after these resources, about wanting to save yourself. Because I can tell you, as someone who tried to commit suicide for the third time in January of 2021, when I got committed for 10 days, man, that was an absolute hell for me. You put me in a little closed off unit, a section full of a bunch of people that are detoxing on heroin and opioids and alcohol, and all I'm there is because I wanted to eat a bullet. And luckily, someone found me before I had that opportunity. And I had to sit in that for 10 days while they just pumped me through meds and basically said, hey, you can't sleep, so let's give you more meds to make you go to sleep. I said, well, no, it's not the meds. It's the fact that I have a guy going through DT in my room, screaming nonstop, going through a psychosis. They don't care. Nobody's coming for us. If we want to make a difference, there's people like you and many more out there that I'm following that are trying to make the difference and get it out there. And I feel like the more that we talk about this and we get it out there and we put it in front of people and basically get buy-in, because I want to try to help as many people I can that are already in the profession, but more importantly, I think just like you, I want to build it so that way when the new generation comes into these professions, they have those tools, they have those resiliencies. Hopefully they're aware of childhood trauma and how a job or a profession in public safety is going to be a force multiplier for some of those underlying issues, and really kind of express how we can, hey, it's okay that you feel this way. It's okay that you had childhood trauma. There's nothing wrong with you. Doesn't mean you can't be a police officer or a firefighter. But we highly suggest that you start working with a therapist or whatever that is. And you're right. There is no one resource. There's no light switch that's going to make this go away magically. It's just working through it and being relentless, as you mentioned.
It is. And I think you brought up a good point just right there, because, oftentimes people don't seek out a counselor or therapist until the huge one happens, the big incident after many years of working this profession. But I think if you establish this trusted relationship early on, and when I say that, I mean a truly culturally competent clinician, somebody who truly understands what it means to be a first responder and knows the uniqueness of what we do and what we see, those people can be a valuable asset. And in my case, I never had that relationship until way after a huge incident and many years of other incidents. And so I encourage people, before anything happens, find a good culturally competent clinician or therapist, set a baseline relationship. It's a trusted environment where it's literally just getting things off your chest. It could be things that have nothing to do with the job. It could be relationship issues. It could be, financial stressors at home. It could be job related. It could be health related. It's just having somebody that you can talk to about anything and everything and know that there's not going to be negative ramifications on you, on your career, and that they can help guide you through these issues. And so again, I tell people, look now, find a culturally competent clinician in your area, make an 100%. Appointment, and I'm not talking you have to go like every week or every 2 weeks. You could go once a year maybe, if you don't have anything going on, but at least you have this trust. So when the big one does happen, you can pick up your phone and call them and say, look, I need to come see you tomorrow or the day after that. You already have that. Whereas in my case, I literally had nothing. I mean, my agency had tons of resources. We had peer support, contracted clinicians, all these things, but I never used them. I never trusted them. And so, again, when the big one happened, I didn't go to those to use them because I didn't believe in them. But again, if you start that early and you do trust it, you do believe in it, it's going to be there for you when you need it most.
Two parts to that, Michael, and it's a great point to bring up. I try to bring it up almost in every episode that I do, but find a therapist now. It's what I tell people is what I went through, right? I needed it. It was big. I wanted to talk to someone. It took weeks to find, it took weeks just to get my first appointment with someone, first off. And I go to, hey, Google my health insurance, who's covered under my plan, first responder trauma. Well, be aware out there for our listeners and viewers that just because they say they have first responder trauma does not mean they have a lot of dedicated first responder experience. So, and I had to go through 5 to find the one that best fit with me. But now, just like you said, if something happens, something comes up in my life, I hit a speed bump where my resources or my tools just don't seem to be doing it, I can just pick up the phone or I can text her and said, hey, Mel, can I get the next? The other thing that I really enjoyed, and I hate, people are like, you enjoyed therapy? Yeah, I enjoyed therapy. I really did. Every session. Sometimes I didn't want to go. Trust me. Knew what, we were potentially going to talk about or address. But it allowed me to start taking those baby steps and sharing my experience, right? Getting some of this stuff off. So then I can have more candid conversations with, people such as yourself. But I also look at the other side of, you mentioned that your department had all those opportunities, resources, counselors, peer support team, all of that stuff in place, but you didn't take advantage of it. I think a lot of people, and if people read your story and listen to it, they'll understand kind of where your hesitancy came into, because I think the hesitancy that you have is you can feel it across the entire, professions. It's the fact that we just don't trust our own departments because we get labeled, we get stigmatized, you've been through it, I've been through it, but you get shunned. And that feeling alone of abandonment, along with all the other stuff and the identity crisis that I started going through, that's really, really heavy for somebody. And luckily, I had the resilience. I didn't end in suicide, because I know right now, if I don't do these works, if I'm not checking in with my therapist, doing my daily routines, things like that, I am going to get off track. And I know what the end result is going to be. I've been there. I've sat in that seat. I still carry the bullet in my truck. So I remember, it is a firm reminder of me and where I've been. But I also want to, encourage people, some resources are better than no resources in a state of crisis. If you don't know where else to go other than, potentially end your life, by all means, contact your EAP, call 988, text it. There's so many different resources out there to help you out. But I do share your sentiment, and a lot of people are just reserved when it comes to utilizing their own agency's resources. Do you have any insights, from where you've been in your career to where you are now? Are you seeing kind of a cultural shift or change among leadership, organizations, institutions in this, or are we still kind of dragging our feet?
That's a very good question, and it's not a simple answer. I will tell you that I think there is some really good momentum, and there's a lot of positive changes that are happening. I think it really comes down to each individual agency and the leadership there and the culture. You literally could have agencies in the same county who are night and day on how they treat this stuff and what resources they provide, and whether people are outcast if they ask for help. And when I go speak across the nation, I hear good stories and I hear bad stories, and it's really heartbreaking, some of the things that I hear, these experiences of people that did try to reach out for help and what ended up happening with them. And, I honestly think that we have a real problem with our quote unquote leaders. And
Agreed.
ironically enough, when I speak, very rarely request for me to come speak to their employees, their firefighters, their officers. More often than not, it's a nonprofit who's doing a training conference or a summit. Maybe it's a state organization or a county organization that's putting on a training conference. But very rarely do I see, especially police chiefs, that want to bring in people like myself to talk about the realities of the job and the things that are happening. And it's heartbreaking because they want to pretend like this problem doesn't exist.
Exactly. They don't want you to rip the Band-Aid off, right? It's like, oh shoot, if Michael comes in here, we're going to get a floodgate of all these people that are going to now leverage EAP or take time off. Yes. I agree. I don't ever get asked by agencies. Very seldom do I get asked by agencies to come talk about organizational culture or things like this. It's more or less like, hey, this doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. I also, you hit a good point, like leadership. Definitely some leadership and organizational culture issues within our professions. But more importantly, I feel like, at least in some of the instances where I tried to maybe get something going, peer support, things like that, they seem to put a fear behind it because they feel like it opens them up to like legal exposure and all this other legality stuff, and they're going to get lawsuits. And so it's better just to pretend like, hey, there's not that gorilla over there in my corner right here. Everything's just hunky-dory, and we're going to keep on pressing. But that is definitely not the way to make change and really kind of lead our professions into the next age. We have to learn from where we've been in order to continue to sustain ourselves. And when you look at burnout rates, suicide rates, all that stuff among first responders, it's staggering, absolutely astonishing at not only the breadth of the problem, but the continued rate of climb, I would call it, as we see more resources and more talk. You're still seeing the rates just almost go to a pure 90-degree angle. And it's, it scares me because I hope to see that flatten out at some point, but we're not seeing it right now.
You're absolutely right. And, I've seen some crazy things. I mean, I've had actual police chiefs of very large agencies tell me they don't believe in post-traumatic stress injury. They think that, officers are faking it, that they're making it up. I've seen police chiefs.
Witchcraft, right?
Yeah, I've seen police chiefs of an agency who have a suicide in inside their building. A police sergeant, shot themselves and killed himself, and then months later, they're now a chief or deputy chief of a different organization in another area, another county, never having addressed what happened, never acknowledging it. Oftentimes you'll see, like on social media especially, you'll see like officer so-and-so died unexpectedly, and it won't say why, it won't expose the realities of it, and it's heartbreaking. I recently had a spouse of a police officer who went home and killed himself, and you didn't hear anything from the agency. You didn't hear any leaders come out and try to address this and attack it head on. You heard nothing. And now I have literally family members that reach out to me who don't know me saying, hey, I need help because the agency is doing nothing for me. There's no resources. I'm left high and dry. I've got nothing. And they don't know where to turn. And we need our leaders.
I swear it's just lip service, right? To me, it seems like lip service from the administration. It's always lip service. Like, yeah, we got this great thing if this happens. But you mentioned something that and I just want your thoughts because I know how I feel and what I would want. But you're right. They always say unexpectedly passed away, right? My first thought when I see something like that come across my news, because it happens here. We had one not too long ago here in Salt Lake. And it was just, it was an unexpected death. No, I know what happened because I know the story. I know people within the industry and the community that I could reach out to that told me. But no, this was a suicide. Why don't we call it what it is? Why do we say, hey, they died unexpectedly? Why don't we say, hey, they died by suicide? Because at least for me, I think it's calling it what it is, which then puts a picture and something behind it versus trying to hide behind this facade of lip service and masking of we don't have a problem. And I guess I struggle with that.
Well, my thing is especially being a former military member, a leader, and it's like okay, so you're telling me that there was a suicide at your agency. The first thing I want to go to is I want to go to the chief of that agency, and I want to find out what happened. I want to find out, were there warning signs? Did this person reach out for help? Did people notice things and not do anything about it? But like you said, they don't want to open Pandora's box, and they don't want that blame to be pointed at them because they're these perfect leaders, these perfect chiefs. Exactly. And it's like,
oh, it'll be bad, it'll tarnish my reputation, bullshit. I call it bullshit.
That's costing more lives, though, and that's the reality of this, is when you don't address it, when you don't talk about it, when you try to cover it up and just pretend like it never happened, more suicides will happen, and that is a fact.
So, Michael, not to digress a whole lot, but just on this specific topic, because I know you're out of California. I know recently, I believe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, approximately, but there were 4 LA County sheriff's officers that killed themselves in the span of, a day, 2 days, something like that?
Yes.
And once again, I've seen the trends with LA County sheriffs, but it happens small department, big department, fire, everybody. But I really didn't see them come out and pull out an initiative. I've been following the group page internally. I don't see any changes actually after. That's a dramatic number to have 4 of your employees felt like they got so down the road that they needed to take their life to end their suffering and the pain that they were experiencing. And trust me, I know what that feels like. I've been there. I've been right in their seat. I just failed at my execution, which I'm totally fine with. But I don't see that agency really rising up. If I was chief, and not that I am, and would be qualified for that position, but I would really want to make it a precedence and maybe even take it even above and make our department a pillar of mental health and resiliency and really get to the root cause of what is causing this. Because what I've seen, which is tragic in some departments, is once someone does it, you typically the instances of it happening again within the same department in the same year are extremely high. I'm just going to, I don't have any good numbers. I can't quote anything off the top of my head, but just trends that I've observed.
No, you're absolutely right. And here's the thing is, those 4 deputies, they killed themselves, I think, within a 24-hour period. That's just the ones we know about. Imagine how many suicides happened for that entire year just for LA County. And I'm not talking about just the active first responders or active deputies. What about the people that retired? Because that's another issue where, a year or 2 after retirement is when it hits most people. And that's when a lot of people also commit suicide. And so even these numbers, the best numbers that we have from First Help or Blue Help or Firefighter Behavioral Alliance, all these different organizations, they're trying to do the best they can. But these numbers are at least 3 to 4 times underreported, if not even more. We know the tip of the iceberg.
We don't know who's dying, and because we're not tracking the veteran suicides, right? Especially with veteran retired dispatchers, retired correctional officers, we're not tracking any of that. So I know the numbers are not where they're supposed to be, and I'm still scared because those numbers are still scary. Right? They are definitely something that cause alarm if you know anything about just basic addition, right? And percentages. It's, it really kind of, it blows me away that we're still here in 2023 and we haven't figured out a better way to track some of this stuff. And we haven't been as progressive as other industries. I feel like we're kind of rooted in that bravado of tradition, and this is the way we've always done it, but it definitely does not help breaking the silence among those who need to share and need to understand that is a very normal human response.
Absolutely. And again, it's going to be one conversation at a time, one person getting out there and being vulnerable, being open. The thing is, we all have a story. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do for work, whether you're a first responder, military member or not. We all deal with adversity. We've all had trauma in our life. And sharing is not only healing for yourself, but it's healing for other people. And that's what normalizes these discussions, realizing that, hey, it's not just me. Like you feel the same way as I do. I just never knew it because we don't talk about it. Yeah. And that's where we need to get to. And so again, I implore these leaders these agency heads, be real, be open, be vulnerable. I've seen this recently in the military where there is generals and, the highest enlisted ranking member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He just retired. He was a Air Force pararescue. He openly talked about his struggles with mental health. There's a 2-star general that recently wrote a book about his mental health struggles. And that's what we need more of, is we need these fire chiefs, police chiefs to be open and honest about their struggles, about the things they've gone through, the effects on their families, and stop trying to portray this perfect image, because that is not reality and it doesn't exist. And that's the thing, is this solution doesn't cost a dime. All it costs is people to be themselves and to be open, honest, and vulnerable.
And I would add, create a safe space. A lot of people, without that safe space, they don't want to come out. Even on Facebook groups, chats, private chats, they're always hesitant because there's always that fear of, I'm going to lose my job. And by helping talk about stuff like this and fostering and nurturing that culture, I hope that we're doing that. I really do. I hope we're creating safer places where we can have more discussions, and it becomes more and more okay to say, hey, I had a bad day. I need to go home. I need a little bit of time off. And we have those leaders that are understanding, compassionate, and empathetic, and just a human, for Christ's sakes, that can listen and take that in and go, okay, yeah, I get it, because I've been there too. Because I don't know any leader that has gotten to the position that they are in public safety or as a first responder, that has not gone through similar types of challenges and adversities that both you and I have experienced, Michael.
Absolutely.
But on the last kind of thought, I wanted to kind of pick your brain, since, your book is all about relentless courage. What are some key points real quick in closing that, listeners, first responders, members, viewers, that they can use to overcome the stigma? What can they take away from this one episode to help you with your mission and our mission in smashing that stigma?
One of the biggest mistakes that I made very early on in my career, and I made this decision in the police academy, is that I would never bring work home. I would never talk about the job. I thought I was protecting my family. I thought I was protecting my wife, my daughter. And the reality was that I created an environment where there weren't these open lines of communication, where I was regularly talking about my bad days or talking about my struggles. When I came home pissed off or in a bad mood, my family was walking on eggshells around me because they thought it was something they did, or they did something wrong. They didn't realize that it's because, literally I saw a child die right in front of me that day. And so I just really encourage people, and, it's too late for me in that relationship, and I've moved on, and I have a phenomenal partner in my life, and we talk about these things, and I'm open now, and I've learned from my mistakes. But I want people to know that it's never too late to start this. And today is the best day, right? I mean, start these lines of communication. And I have a solution for you. It's very simple, and this has been working. But this book, Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma, I've heard over and over from basically partners or a husband and wife, where one will read the book and then they'll have their partner or spouse read the book. And then for the very first time after doing so, they'll come together and have a conversation about this, because this book lays that foundation. It gives that baseline knowledge, and it also gives that comfort to that first responder that when their partner reads this book, they're going to realize this is normal, and that, we should be talking about this, we should be dealing with this. And you can do this in the privacy of your own home without having to notify EAP, without having to call hotlines or see a therapist. But you can start your journey of recovery today, literally, by either listening or reading this book.
I would 100% agree, Michael. And that's funny, because that's exactly what me and my wife were doing. I had just finished reading it. She heard me listening to it in some of the episodes, so now she's listening to it as well. And, we're both in the medical field, and, it's nice because part of my recovery has been opening those lines of communication with my own family and letting them know, like, hey, I'm not okay, or hey, I just need some alone time. I don't know why I'm off. I don't know why I'm stressed. This has nothing to do with you. I just maybe need to go decompress for a minute, or check out, meditate, whatever that might be. But I definitely encourage you guys, and you're right, Michael, it's never too late to save your marriage. I've saved my marriage. It is possible, just like you can heal yourself with PTSI. The tools and resources are out there, and I would definitely encourage everybody to pick up that book and really kind of dive into it. Be open your mind, try not to be distracted, but there are so many good points you can lay down that do foster and open up those lanes of communication between you and your spouse, you and your employer. Who knows? But you don't know until you read it. So, I'm not going to ruin the book for everybody, but I highly, highly suggest you go pick up a copy. Michael, how else can they find you, your mission, your book? Tell us, how do we get a hold of this?
So the book is on Amazon. It's on Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, but I think Amazon's the best because you can get hardcover, softcover, Kindle, the Audible version, which the Audible version is recorded in our own voices, straight from our heart and soul. You're going to hear directly from myself and Doc Shauna Springer. As far as getting a hold of me, I'm on pretty much every social media platform. I'm on there every single day, from LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Parler, Truth, you name it, I'm on there. Just look up Michael Sugrue, Sugrue, and send me a message. I would love to hear your thoughts after reading or listening to this book. And like I said, I do speak across the nation, usually only 4 to 5 times a year. I just booked something out in Beaver Creek, Ohio. So if anyone's out in that area, I'm going to be in Ohio October of next year. And there's many more engagements coming. So I announce all of those on my social media platforms. So again, just reach out. I will respond. I'd love to hear from you.
Love it, brother. And I really love your mission and everything about what you do, your transparency, your humility, your vulnerability. Thank you for being an example for others to follow. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be able to get you out at the Mind the Frontline outdoor first responder conference / retreat that we're going to do in May. We're still kind of getting that set up, but we're going to be doing it outdoors. I've done similar medical conferences like that, and just the energy is just unreal when it comes to what you walk away with. So awesome. I definitely appreciate that. Guys, check him out. Go pick up the book. You won't put it down, or you won't stop playing it. I guarantee it. As we wrap up another enlightening episode of Critical Conversations by Mind the Frontline, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to both Michael for his insights on his book, Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma and Unveiling the Battlefield Within. As we talked about it today, his experience with frontline trauma and a former police sergeant and being a best-selling author. I've been hearing your voice throughout the whole Audible, which you're right. It is your and Dr. Springer's voice, and it's a trip, man. I'm not going to lie. But if you guys found, if you're a viewer, a member, a listener, if you guys found today's discussions enlightening, you like what we're putting out there, you're loving stuff like this, and want to stay connected, we wholeheartedly invite you to go and continue with our mission. Be sure to subscribe to the Critical Conversations podcast via Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and our own Mind the Frontline resource page. Your subscription ensures that you never miss an episode, and it really is a powerful way for you to communicate your support and fostering resilience among the entire first responder community. So to our dedicated listeners, thank you for joining us on this critical journey. Your support makes an impact to these conversations and makes those conversations resonate even further. This is how we smash the stigma, people. So for more information and additional resources, you can hop over to www.mindthefrontline.org. We have state-by-state resources, audio, podcasts, educational, professional leadership. You're going to find Michael's book as a recommendation on there. So together, let's continue these critical conversations and build a strong, more resilient first responder family. And until next time, take care, stay strong, and mind the front. To our dedicated listeners, thank you again for joining us on this critical journey. Remember, the Critical Conversations podcast is a steadfast resource for police, fire, EMS, allied healthcare workers, dispatchers, air medical, and military personnel, along with their families. Your support makes the impact of these conversations resonate even further. If you found today's discussion enlightening and want to stay connected with our ongoing mission, please be sure to subscribe to the Critical Conversations podcast. You can find us via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and the Mind the Frontline website. Your subscription ensures that you will never miss an episode, and it's a powerful way to show your commitment to fostering resilience within the entire first responder community. For more information and additional resources, visit our website at www.mindthefrontline.org. Together, let's continue these critical conversations and build a stronger, more resilient first responder family. We thank you for being a part of the Critical Conversations podcast. Until next time, take care, stay strong, and mind the front line.